Big Brother or About Time? Police facial recognition cameras on English streets, already operating in Wales, have been there for some time. I'm thinking the Daily Mail is in the About Time camp.
Look, we've got to do something, because crime, frankly, is out of control. These facial recognition cameras potentially could be the biggest breakthrough I think, in the fight against crime since DNA. It's hugely significant, but there have been gremlins with the technology, there have been mistakes. The police are telling us the technology's dramatically improved. It's the old argument, what have you got to fear? If you don't want to be filmed...
Shall I give you one of those cases?
Sure.
So, Sean Thompson, who's 39, because obviously there have been lots of pilots before it's being rolled out. He was stopped by police in February last year outside London Bridge tube station, and he's bringing a High Court challenge against the Met because live facial recognition technology wrongly identified him as a suspect. He describes it as a stop and search on steroids. And I guess Sean Thompson happens to be black. There was concern over early tech, I don't know if it still stands, that actually it wasn't as good at identifying faces of non-white skin than it is of white skin. And I guess what the fear behind that might be, not speaking for Sean Thompson, is that, you know, there's already a fear and maybe a reality, the stats look, of the numbers of non-white people that get stopped and searched, that this could be a tech version of it.
Yeah, I don't know the intricacies of how that tech works, but, I mean, it wouldn't be shocking to me if there had been less thought into how this identifies black faces compared to how it identifies white faces. You know, that's not going to be a shock to me. I think what would be interesting is if you present this to the people who were arrested at the Southport riots last year, predominantly white, and you say to them, you are now going to be part of a database, you will be facial recognised if you commit any crime, and I think you'll have an uproar from the British people, because I think that most people think this won't affect me. But it will. It will affect every single person in the UK. I think this is incredibly dangerous. We should not be tracked leaving our house every single day. It's frightening. Where is that going to be stored?
Well, I think that's the point, isn't it? Because, you know, there's a very clear argument. I can hear my mum's voice now. If you've done nothing wrong, it doesn't matter. You know, that's one side of it, isn't it? The other side of it is, hang on, we already feel like everything from banking, our personal information. We're talking to Dave Fishwick later about information online being hacked. We suddenly think, who's using this information? Who would influence it? But I wonder if that's because we've all watched too many TV shows.
Well, no, I think,
you know, where it is wrong.
Because if you look at, for example, NHS data, that's still in the offing about whether some NHS data is going to be sold off to private companies. And at this point in time, that is anonymised, so you won't have your name attached. How do you know that governments in a few years' time, I am perhaps conspiracy theorising, but I don't think it's that far out of the realm, how do you know that they won't say, look, we need to find $1 billion here? What if we sold all of this facial recognition information to, say, a private company over in Santa Monica? That could raise us a quick buck.
What would they do with it, though, that would be bad? I'm just trying to follow the train of thought.
Because if you look at your credit card details, how important they are to companies, most of it is really around advertising and what products are aimed at people. Like if you're using certain social media sites, if you consent to give over your data, that's very valuable to them because it just means that they can sell you more products.
I can see the motivation for you expressing those fears, but if you look at Wales, for example, they've been trialling this, or actually they're not trialling, they've been doing it since 2017, and we haven't had any of the consequences that you're discussing here. There have been no scandals coming out of Wales of either misuse of information or chronic misidentifying of people. Well, you say but that's been going on since 2017.
I'm not sure, because I don't have the figures if it's helped solving crime either.
Well, I was going to ask you, Andrew, who are we looking for with these cameras? Are we looking for prisoners on the run? Are we looking for someone who has a record for rape and is suspected of rape and is being hunted down by the police?
Known offenders.
Yeah.
Known offenders.
Known offenders.
And it's going to help the police. Look, there will be mistakes, but the police make mistakes anyway when they do a manual search.
Well, I was going to say that.
Nothing's perfect.
You quoted that example of the guy who's suing the police now, but he could easily have been stopped by a police officer who thought he recognised him in a criminal context wrongly.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things called wrongful arrests. Yeah. They do happen.
Crime is massively on the rise in this country. We don't have enough police officers for all sorts of reasons, and this technology is going to be of an assistance to them. I get Ava's reservations about where the information's stored, and there have to be assurances about that. But it's coming, it's progress, and we've got to get with it.
What about face coverings? Obviously you've got religiously related face coverings like burqas and hijabs, and you've got health, allegedly, health face coverings, the masks, and you look out in any city centre, you've got these young lads speeding around on power bikes, faces completely masked. It's not going to catch any of them, is it?
Well, at protests as well, people are frightened now while they're at protests about facial recognition, so a lot of people will wear masks.
But if you go, the last march we had on Saturday, the big pro-Palestinian march, helicopters flying all over central London, they're filming. It's already happening, in a sense. This is just a way of doing it much more accurately in a much more
Well, we've talked a
way.
lot, haven't we? And I know everybody at home has got involved in it, about concerns about shoplifting.
Yeah.
Not a big, violent crime, but crikey, it has a massive impact on those that it's perpetrated against and can be connected to violent gangs. Would that be an easy way for shops to help, you know, protect themselves?
But in theory, but then what about the conviction rate? Because you were talking there about rapists just a minute ago, and let's take that as an example. The conviction rate for rape in this country is under 5%.
Yep.
So say, for example, facial recognition is stellar and it works fantastically and you can identify who is who. Well, what happens then? Does that increase convictions? Why would sentencing suddenly miraculously change because we've got new technology? And I would apply that to shoplifting. Why on earth would more shoplifters go to prison just because you've got facial recognition?
Because they've caught them. I think that they've got it all wrong in this approach to shops. I think it's outrageous that shopkeepers aren't allowed to put photographs up in their shop saying these are persistent suspects, shout if you see them, so they can be booted out the shop. I just think the police need this. They're asking for it. They're struggling. They're like...
Well, listen, we've got some figures in that have just arrived from Essex Police, who have been trialling this in Southend-on-Sea, which is a nice city, as we know. Hang on, it's just jumped. Oh,
I think we've got some Welsh ones, South Wales.
Just a minute.
Because Wales have been doing it since 2017, so they say they've had no false alerts reported since August 2019 and multiple arrests thanks to the use of the live facial recognition.
Yeah, and I think...
And then you've got the new ones from Southend.
Yes, here we are. Essex Police have arrested 56 people for offences ranging from dangerous dog offence to attempted murder. Those are figures released on June the 19th. Facial recognition scanners, they say, have been deployed in major thoroughfares across Essex since they were introduced in Southend, and they're used by police to track and arrest wanted people. Even if they provide false information about their identity, the cameras will disprove that. So 56 arrests, which isn't exactly...
And there's always an argument about civil liberties versus law and order, but I think law and order, they're losing the war here on law and order, which is why sometimes, perhaps, civil liberty is going to have to be compromised in the battle to make us safer.
I would love to see community policing back. I just think this is a cheap get-out. I think this is like, look, we can put in cameras a lot cheaper than we can have police officers working in neighbourhoods. You know, if you talk to any inner-city teacher, you talk to anyone who works with children or you know, youth offenders around larger cities, they'll tell you that the decline in community policing has led to much of the crime that you see around. Things that were defunding programmes that were specifically for youth, for young people, that has been one of the problems.
What's the difference between using the images that we're talking about here to actually intervene before a crime is recommitted and the kind of images which are used all the time in crime detection? Doorbell cameras, body cameras, car cameras. Pardon?
I hate that too. And do you know what the worst thing?
But they're here to stay.
Why do you hate that?
Because I think that you do have a right, and I'm going to sound like I've got a tinfoil hat on, I do think you have a right to leave your house and not be filmed and documented.
But what if it shows somebody committing a serious offence, like a serious assault, say on the doorbell camera?
Yeah.
You can't say that's a bad thing.
No, absolutely. What my problem is the publishing online. So I think you're well within your right to have a Ring doorbell. You're looking after the security of your home. However, now, people post that online. You'll have someone who might trip over, someone who might make a fool of themselves, and they become an online spectacle. I do think you have a right to have privacy.
Well, it's how it's shared and
yeah,
used.
absolutely. And this is the concern about facial recognition. Because how do you know how that's going to be used?
The world is a camera now, and so that's why the police need the camera as well in the fight against crime.
What do you feel about this?
Well, reading Amnesty International's concerns around the fact that disproportionately people of colour could be affected and could be pointed out wrongly. In the case of Sean Thompson, we've seen that. I think what the public will really need to see from the government and police forces are the reassurances around how, as Ava said, the data is going to be stored, how robustly that is going to be stored, but also assurances around the officers who are examining that information, or the tech that is examining that information, to ensure that there are few mistakes, and also where there is a robustness in the process of a wrongful arrest. Unless that comes alongside the points that we see, which are very fair and valid, around the need for enhanced policing, people need to be reassured around how effective the examination of the data is going to be.
Yeah, very interesting, because you would worry that simply having that facial recognition, or you might worry, or anybody might worry, would become almost the proving factor in a way that it doesn't when someone says, oh, I think it's you now. There needs to be greater burdens of proof, doesn't there, and discussion and debate.
Well, it's something else causing controversy this morning. We'll be discussing this later in the programme. Police in England and Wales are now going to be encouraged, not ordered to, but encouraged, and this is a big change in government policy, to disclose a suspect's ethnicity and nationality when they're charged in a high-profile or a sensitive case. Now, this
this comes after debates we were having last week.
Absolutely.
When you weren't here, and the Home Secretary was on our programme, and it surrounds, you know, several attention and dilemma for the government that's been described before. So the police have to make a decision about whether to release the ethnicity and, in some cases, the identity too of suspects, and they've been trying to do it in a way to cause less disorder, if I could put it that way. So in England and Wales, they did it very effectively in May in Merseyside. They were quick to release it. The man arrested when the car ploughed through crowds, causing all sorts of horrors. They were quick to release that person was white, and it did dissolve things. There was huge concern and debate about not releasing the ethnicity and the citizenship of the perpetrator, the now convicted murderer of those slaughtered in Southport. And if they had done, maybe it would have stopped the vacuum being filled by people suggesting asylum seeker and all sorts of things like that. So the Home Secretary spoke to us last week specifically about this.
Has been widely reported that this is to Afghan individuals and that they are in the asylum system. And I think that in some of that information has actually been confirmed in court now as well. But we do want more information to be provided. We do recognise that it is an operational decision for the police, Crown Prosecution Service, to decide in a live investigation when information can be revealed. But the College of Policing is already looking at the policing guidance, and we are also, the Home Office is working with the police on how that guidance needs to be changed and updated to make sure that there is proper information provided for people.
So it feels like in the battle between government and police, because it is the power of the police whether to release, the government's desire has won.
It's not the government's desire, though, is it? It's social media's desire. I think this is totally nonsensical. This has been whipped up because Axel Rudikabana, who, as you said, he was the killer in Southport that inspired all of these riots. There was this furore that was whipped up online around whether he was an asylum seeker.
Well, it wasn't whether. They said quite wrongly that he was.
Yeah. But this is what the
argument
was.
Exactly. What this is meant to do is to stop that kind of thing from happening.
But he was a person of colour. Why would that have changed anything? It would have still been the same whipping up of fear and loathing.
Well, that was the dilemma, that the police didn't do that. So you think in any situation where it's a person of colour, releasing that information feeds into racism.
But I mean, I think that you almost answered it in yourself in your sort of preamble, because you said that the man in Liverpool who drove into crowds, he was white, and that quashed all of the potential riot that could have ensued afterwards. Why was that?
What do you think, Andy?
I think the public are entitled to know, and I think transparency is the better.
I completely agree.
When we were young reporters, Richard, when we were doing criminal investigations, the basics you got when you went to court was name, age, address, and if they were Somalian, you would say so.
Yes.
Why are we having to cover this? Well, you just put everything in the public domain.
Yes.
The public are entitled to know. Transparency is always better.
But there was no social media.
Okay,
No, I know, but that's what we're...
I think you have to trust the public.
You do.
You have to treat the British public as adults.
Absolutely.
And that means giving them all that means giving them all relevant information. And as you say, basic journalism, good, honest, straightforward reporting means that you give as much detail about a suspect or a convict as you possibly can. And withholding information, I think, has the opposite effect to the one that you're describing.
It fans the
What
flames.
if they get it wrong? What if the police are wrong?
Well, you can say
I
that
bring
about any
Marvin
scenario,
in
can't
here as somebody that isn't white? I know you have concerns, and we're in a new age of social media that isn't when Andrew and I were cub reporters. You know, do you have concerns, or do you think it is helpful?
I think it's helpful in this climate that we're in now, but I think there's a much wider issue that we are not tackling, which is that it feeds into a narrative of a non-white person is a problem, is a potentially violent criminal, is someone who will perpetrate a harsher crime than a white person. And there is this narrative and rhetoric across much of media which reinforces that, which then feeds across social media, which then has the potential to inflame things. And unless, as a country, as a society, that rhetoric is addressed at the highest level, whether it be institutions, government, to say, we are not this country, we are a people, a nation, who have readily accepted people from different backgrounds. But there is a narrative now that says people of non-white backgrounds are troublemakers, whether they are asylum seekers or not. That is a narrative that never was around.
No. But the more you withhold
when I was younger.
The more you withhold that information...
Yes, I understand. There are two different things. Withholding information is an issue. Yes.
When it is released,
but we need to address who we are as a society.
Or when it leaks out, it has much more impact because it is a rarity. If you actually completely lift the lid on this and are open every single time somebody is accused or arrested or charged, you are open about who they are and where they're from, you reduce the impact of the rare occasions when it leaks or it leaks inaccurately.
I appreciate that, but it goes hand in hand with a rhetoric which is across the country now, which is, you know, it's got to be a black person, it's got to be an asylum seeker who's done this hideous thing. And if it is, we're going to kick off as a nation. And if it is a white person, it's OK. Right? There is this rhetoric, and you cannot deny that is what is across media and social media today that never was.
I don't think...
In this way right now.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't think you can say that if a white person is accused of a horrendous crime, people shrug and say that's OK because they're white. I think it's nonsense.
That's what happened in Liverpool. That's literally what happened in Liverpool. When he ploughed into those people.
Yeah.
Well, he's a suspect and he is in court, so just to say the person accused did. I'm not correcting you, Ava. I know your point. I know your point is there, but I know what you mean.
But can anyone on this desk deny that there is, every time you open a paper, every time you see social media, there is some judgment, a harsher judgment, and we see that played out?
Marvin, I just want to make it clear, nobody wants to deny your view in any way. That's why I wanted to bring you in.
But I feel so strongly about that, and I feel that's what underlies...
I think transparency is much the best way, because when they don't give us the details, people think they're covering up, and why are you covering up? And that makes it so much worse.
But you're covering up, quote unquote, to use your language, because it hasn't gone to trial yet, and you don't know if you've got the correct person. And I think everyone actually around this table would agree that people have a right to a fair trial.
Absolutely.
And if you prejudice a jury, not only could the trial collapse, but it could also mean, that person could then roam free.
Well, also, more than that, Ava, I think what Marvin's touching on is before we even get to the point of a fair trial for the individual victims and, you know, for the suspect to see justice, whether they're guilty or not, the fallout and the potential damage, you're saying, is vast for so many others anyway, if it's wrongly used, you know.
And it also feeds into the fact that, you know, whenever I go into a store in central London and central Birmingham, I'm occasionally followed by security because people think, oh, what's she about? What's she about?
Really?
Because I'm potentially viewed as someone who might be a shoplifter.
Gosh.
Generally, things that happen and in the way that people assume that people who are not white are up to something.
Couldn't agree more about the case, the issue of a fair trial. And the presumption of innocence. But that doesn't mean you don't give information about someone who's been charged. You give their name, you give their address, you give their age, you give all sorts of information about someone who's been charged. That isn't prejudicial to their trial. You're simply saying, this is the person who's been accused.
It also helps the police, but often, because the more people know about the suspect, more information can often come to light about their past activities. It's an important part of policing.
I think that if you were the person who was on trial or being charged, or it was a relative, I think you would think differently. You would think, I would like the right to a fair trial.
So you think the presumption of not identifying people who have been charged with an offence should be introduced?
Well, OK, this is a nuanced conversation that I don't know if we can have on breakfast TV, but I do think people should be allowed to have a fair trial. And I also, I cannot see a situation where, if Axel Rueda-Cabana last year, if his ethnicity had been identified at the time, I cannot see that having quelled the Southport riots.
I think it would have. I think it would have, because people were told that he'd come over on a small boat across the Channel, and in fact he was born in Wales, and his parents were migrants from Rwanda from 30 years ago. They'd fled. They'd fled a terrible.
But how febrile the environment is now, and where the sort of sum of the social media commentariat is, I don't think that story would have pleased them. I don't think hearing that his parents came from Rwanda 30 years ago, I don't think they would have sat down and said, OK, I'm not going to go out and riot.
What are we going to do? Suppress everything just in case?
I don't think it's suppression.
It is.
I don't think it is that.
It is. You're suppressing the facts.
Oh, but no. I actually thought it was a real disservice to those young girls who were killed that day for us to all focus on the ethnicity of this person.
That is what I call a stimulating discussion.
Yep.
Marvin, thank you very much indeed.
I'm sure we'll come back to it. Let us know your thoughts as well at home. You two are coming back as well. Marvin's here all morning. I think it's such an important one.